Good evening. We are going to now call to order the December 8th, 2022 Board of Commissioners working session. And our first item of business this evening is a motion to approve the minutes from the working session of October 13th, 2022, and I so move.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the minutes have been approved. For this evening, we have three agenda items. The first is a conditional use hearing, at which time I will turn this over to Solicitor Clark, and then we have two brief presentations about land development applications. And so we are going to move the public comment period from right now to after the presentations take place, so that if folks who are here have comments or questions about the presentations, they can make them at that time. So we will now immediately move to the conditional use hearing, and I will turn this over to Solicitor Clark.
Thank you, Commissioner Hacker. If we could have a motion to open the conditional use hearing.
So moved.
Second.
And it's called for the vote.
Okay, so it's moved to second. All those in favor of opening the hearing?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
President Hecker, I wish to abstain from the vote.
Commissioner Thompson is abstaining. Commissioner Thompson, if you could just briefly state the basis for your abstaining from this vote.
Thank you, Solicitor Clark. As an employee of KCBA Architects, who is the architect of record on this project, I wish to abstain from the vote and the discussion this evening.
Commissioner Schreiber.
I'm also abstaining from this vote. I am an employee of Penn State University.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments before we? All right, all those in favor of opening the hearing?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, we're good.
Thank you, Commissioner Hecker. This is a conditional use application. The applicant is Penn State University. The address is 1600 Woodland Road. The tax parcel number is 30-00-9792-00-6. The application is to permit the university to locate utility transmission lines across the Meadowbrook, which runs through the center of their campus. The utility lines will provide new primary electrical service for the campus, including service to the new academic building proposed along Cloverly Road. The zoning ordinance requires conditional use approval for utility lines to cross a riparian corridor, which includes the creek bed. The design of the crossing will need to be approved by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. The applicant is required to show the provision of corridor mitigation measures as a condition of approval. Mitigation measures as provided by the ordinance include increasing the width of the riparian corridor to compensate for the disturbance. This hearing has been advertised in the Intelligencer on November 23rd and again on November 30th. The applicant is represented by Mark Jonas, Esquire, and I would ask for Mr. Jonas is present on Zoom. And Mr. Jonas, I would ask that you give a brief overview of the project. I would ask further that you provide the witnesses who you are going to present this evening, provide a brief summary of the testimony that they will give, and then ask that your witnesses be made available for any questions or for any member of the public seeking party status. Before you begin, Mr. Jonas, I will ask if there is any member of the public in the room who is seeking party status in this matter. Commissioner Hacker, let the record reflect that no individual in the room raised their hand. Is there anyone online who is seeking party status in this matter? And just to clarify, party status is different from just making public comment, which all members of the public will be allowed to do. Party status gives you the opportunity to present testimony of your own, present witnesses, and to cross-examine any witnesses of the applicant. Is there anyone online seeking party status this evening? Again, we're not seeing any hands raised, so Mr. Jonas, you may proceed.
Good evening, Mr. Clark. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board. I am Mark Jonas, together with Zachary Sivertson. We represent Penn State. Mr. Clark, you have with the application package the deed. Can we assume that the board will take judicial notice relating to the ownership of the property by Penn State University?
Oh, I'm like, wait a minute, teleportation.
I'll send that to him tomorrow, since he yelled at me.
We've got to mute.
Was it something I said?
Clearly not.
Commissioner Rothman appears to be having some telephone issues, getting some feedback, it appears. The application has been received, and if you want to mark it as an exhibit, that is fine. If not, it's already part of the packet and part of the application that the township has received.
I think we can proceed. Thank you, Mr. Clark. So this is a conditional use application for a utility line in the internal part of the campus. This is one very small part of a project that began in 2021 when the Board of Commissioners enacted two ordinance amendments. One was a text amendment that would pave the way for the first new academic building on this campus in decades. There is also a pending land development application, so this should not be confused with the land development application that gets into the very significant details under the subdivision and land development ordinance. So the conditional use is a permitted use. Our responsibility is to show that we meet the requirements. Mr. Clark has already outlined the legal basis for proceeding with conditional use. We would plan to have one witness testified. That's Douglas Waite, a professional engineer. He's with Gilmore and Associates. We would move to have him accepted as an expert in professional engineering and zoning. He has been involved in this project from the beginning. We would go, if we were to have him sworn and testify, he would testify to his qualifications, including his Pennsylvania license as a professional engineer. He's also a certified floodplain manager. He was educated in Drexel University and then attended before that Central Bucks High School. Mr. Waite would describe the property. We have an aerial of the property that shows the entire campus, including the location of the new academic building, including the adjacent street frontages. We would go into the details of the size of the property, the CS Community Service District, and the location of the riparian corridor, which is the reason, the topographical reason why we need conditional use approval to put in a utility line. This is a utility line that is described in the narrative accompanying the application to allow an upgrade of electrical services to serve the campus as a whole, as well as the new academic building. It is needed to accommodate the new academic building. It will utilize, to the extent possible, existing walkways. No existing trees will be disturbed. I say that again, no existing trees will be disturbed. So great thought and planning has gone to locate this utility transmission line with the least disruption of the existing improvements and natural features of the property. There are two crossings of the Meadowbrook tributaries that are involved. Mr. Waite would describe the first crossing that will utilize horizontal directional drilling, which goes beyond my liberal arts background. So if you have detailed questions, I will defer to him. The second crossing will use conventional open trench methods within an existing walkway to install what is known as an electrical duct bank under the enclosed tributary. Mr. Clark has already identified that an outside agency approval from DEP will be required. The location of the duct bank will be 3 feet below what is known as a stream invert. There will be mitigation measures undertaken as outlined in the zoning ordinance section 1508. I will ask Mr. Waite to go through the general conditional use criteria of zoning ordinance 1806, that the proposed transmission line, the utility crossing, is consistent with the spirit, purposes, and intent of the zoning district. It will not be detrimental to the properties in the immediate vicinity. It's in conformance with all applicable requirements of the zoning ordinance and all municipal, state, and federal codes. As we said, we will need DEP approval. There will be certainly no impact whatsoever on the surrounding community. There are no parking areas associated with this improvement. There is no noise, no noxious odors, no air pollution, no lighting. There will be no impact on pedestrian conflicts or other safety hazards. And that is the sum and substance of what our testimony would be if Mr. Waite were to testify at length. I would note also, we have other representatives from Penn State online, including Chancellor Della Carpini, Kyle Hollick from State College, the project architect. They are online, but as I've said this, and as Mr. Clark said, this is a very limited utility transmission crossing requiring a conditional use approval. I did that, Mr. Clark, and I think in 2 breaths.
Yeah, that's very impressive. Commissioner Hecker, I have reviewed Mr. Waite's CV, and I am familiar with Mr. Waite, and I would recommend that he be accepted as an expert in engineering, and that the summary that Mr. Jonas just gave be considered expert testimony from Mr. Waite. If you're in agreement with that, we will note that for the record.
I am in agreement.
So Mr. Waite will be accepted as an expert, and unless Mr. Jonas has any further witnesses who he plans on presenting, it would be appropriate now for members of the board to ask questions of Mr. Jonas's witness, Mr. Waite, or any of the other witnesses who Mr. Jonas has brought with him this evening.
Thank you, Solicitor Clark. I will ask if my colleagues have any questions for the witness. Any of our colleagues on Zoom?
President Hager?
Commissioner Bull, yes.
Could I just ask for a little bit more information about the process to look at the environmental impact of this? And I heard Mr. Jonas, thank you for talking about how this still needs DEP approval. I was just process-wise, I was a little curious about if we're granting conditional use, what the next steps are in terms of doing the requisite environmental studies and getting the DEP approval.
Commissioner, can I defer to Mr. Waite because I think that's information and an answer that you should get from him.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. The need to have this conditional use is.
Yeah, Mr. Waite, you need to be sworn.
Oh, thank you.
Please state your full name for the record and spell it. Please state your full name for the record and spell it.
Mr. Waite, please state your full name for the record and spell it.
It's Douglas A. Waite, Douglas, little initial A, Waite.
And Mr. Waite, since you can't hear the court reporter because she doesn't have a microphone, I'll do the swearing in. Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give in this conditional use application hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may proceed.
A little bit of background: the Abington campus is, has been developed in its current state for, I think, as Mark mentioned, for decades. It's bisected from the north to the south by a tributary to Meadow Brook with a pond on the northern side. The tributary splits into two branches towards the north end of the campus. So there's basically, in order to traverse the site with the duck bank, there's no way to avoid the crossing. So obviously, this is part of as Mark mentioned, part of a larger land development application for an academic building, and we would, assuming conditional approval for that project, part of that, one of those conditions would be to obtain DEP approval, environmental approvals for this crossing. Due to the nature of the crossing being underground, the disturbance to the riparian area is minimized. We've laid out the location of the the duck bank to utilize existing bituminous pathways to the greatest extent possible. So we're really just dealing with a couple of small, limited crossing areas underneath the tributaries themselves. So to answer the question, we will need a DEP GP5, a general permit number 5, for both of these crossings, which will most likely will require us to check for limits of wetlands. We don't expect there to be many because it's the area has been developed for decades with lawns and walkways and all. So we've gone through a very similar utility crossing just recently in the past couple months in Solebury Township, Bucks County, PA. So we're very confident and we were successful with obtaining that permit, and we feel that this is a really similar style crossing. So we anticipate, very streamlined approval process.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Waite. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Commissioner Bowe. Are there any other comments or questions from members of the board, either here or at home? Solicitor Clark.
If there are no further questions, there should be a motion to close the hearing, and then we can take public comment from anyone from the public who wishes to make comment. After public comment is done, the board will give you a motion at that time.
Okay.
And I'd ask that
I'm sorry, those of us on Zoom cannot hear you. I don't think your mic was on.
it was not. I apologize. It would be, if there are no further questions from members of the board, if Mr. Jonas does not have anything further to present, we should have a motion to close the public hearing, and then we should take public comment from those in the room or online.
I have nothing further, Mr. Clark. Thank you for the courtesy.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it has been moved and seconded. The second was Commissioner Carswell, and Commissioner Spiegelman made the motion. All right, it has been moved and seconded. All those in favor of closing the hearing?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The hearing is concluded, and we will now take public comment.
Correct.
Is there anyone here in the room or on Zoom who has a comment or question about this application?
Ms. Slayman, you're unmuted.
I'm just going to take the minute to say that it is appreciated that the presentation is given first and that we are given an opportunity to speak after it, and that also it's appreciated. The president of Penn State will be glad to know that we appreciate having gotten notified, those of us who signed up to be notified. So it's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. All right, hearing no further comments, I will entertain a motion, or I guess can I make it?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion to approve the conditional use application as submitted by Penn State Abington.
Second.
Commissioners opposed? It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The application is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. We look forward to coming back for land development.
Thank you, Mr. Jonas. We'll now move back to the regular working session. Our second item of business this evening is to consider the major subdivision, LD 22-03, and this is for an auto zone located at 1318 and 1330 Easton Road. And Mr. Manfredi, I'll ask you to introduce us to who's going to make the presentation.
Thank you, President Hecker. Ms. Denise Yarnoff is counsel for the applicant and is present to make a brief presentation, give some background and context to the application for the auto zone at 1318 and 1330 Easton Road.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Manfredi. My name is Denise Yarnoff. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, AZ Abington LLC. And as was stated, we're before you tonight regarding an auto zone on Easton Road. We have been working with the township since earlier this year and have been to a number of planning commission meetings and also meeting with staff and consultants. We've made a number of adjustments and modifications to the plan as a result of various comments and planning commission comments. And we, as a result also of review comments, we attended the zoning hearing board for 2 modifications through variance relief and received both of those variances. And we have also received a unanimous recommendation from the Planning Commission. As mentioned, it's an auto zone on Easton Road, and it is replacing existing buildings and going to include significant improvements to the site, including stormwater management and streetscape, and reduction of one of the access points to the site. I'm going to allow our engineer, Keith Marshall, to, if he can share his screen, he can put up the plan quickly and just very quickly run through what the project looks like. And we're before you tonight, of course, asking for a preliminary final approval for this project. So thank you very much. And we also have the applicant here, Bill Roundtree, if there are any specific questions for him as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So as was presented, we are looking at 18 and 1330 Easton Road. It is along Easton Road, and the side streets are Brookdale Lane and Woodland Avenue. We would be combining the 2 properties into one property, into one parcel, in order to build approximately 6,800 square foot retail shop for an auto zone. As has been mentioned, the existing property at 1318 Easton Road actually has 3 access points into it currently, and then there's 1 access point for 1330 that takes access to Woodland Road. Combined together, the site would be approximately 33,000 square feet. We are proposing several amenities and upgrades to the property. For one, the sidewalk and landscaping along all 3 roadways would be redone and upgraded, along with landscaping along the rear to help buffer the proposed use from the rear property. We'll be providing parking spaces for the auto zone, and along with stormwater management. There's currently no stormwater management on the property, and we'll be providing 2 underground stormwater basins and a small rain garden in the back of the property. As I mentioned, we'll be going from 4 access points to 3, and we'll be providing landscaping throughout the property. We are asking for a few waivers that I believe Pannoni has supported, and the Planning Commission also recommended the waivers. I can briefly run through them if you'd like, or if not, I don't need to. It's up to the pleasure of the board on that.
What's that? Okay. You want to ask it now?
Hi, good evening. I have a quick question for you. On the plans I'm looking at where I guess it's the frontage on Easton Road, we had talked about it looking similar to across the street where they're building the Wawa, and I'm wondering if that's what we're seeing in this drawing here with I don't know what you would call it, where the trees are in the front and there's like a reddish line in between, if that's supposed to look like the stone fence? Yeah.
Yes, I can go over that. So we are providing what would be a concrete sidewalk, and then against the curb line, it's what's called a verge. That will be brick pavers interspersed with planting beds for both street trees and shrubs, and then there would be a bench and bicycle rack and trash containers located in those areas. There will be a fence that actually goes along in this grass area along the parking lot that would also have landscaping in front of it. So I can bring up, this is one of the Wawas that we used as an example, and I think it'll look very similar to that. Just so you can see, this is the architecture that's proposed for the proposed AutoZone. It's not a typical AutoZone. We've worked really hard with AutoZone and the township to come up with this architecture, so it fits in with the character of what we've seen in other places in Abington.
So is it brick or is it stone? Because I thought it was going to be matching to across the street, which is stone.
The
fence.
I'm sorry?
The fencing, where the front fencing, it's across the street, it's stone and wrought iron, and it's not brick. I'm sorry, did you say brick or?
So this is what's called a verge. This is like brick pavers. That's what this area is around here. The fence would be a wrought iron fence that would be that goes along the parking lot area.
I'm not sure if he's answering.
Mr. Marshall, I believe what Commissioner Schreiber is referring to is in your rendering where you showed the typical Wawa you were using as a guide. Were there columns that the wrought iron fence connected to? That was
yes.
brick. That was brick. And I think she's referring to those columns. She was expecting those to be stone, not brick.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I misunderstood. Yes, they will be stone. We were using the Wawa as an example for the architecture and the layout, not necessarily the materials.
But
so yes, those columns
will
would be stone.
Right, they will be stone.
They will be stone.
He showed you brick, but it will be stone.
Mr. Hassan, in your letter to Manager Manfredi, you recommended the approval of this plan and the waivers contingent upon the applicant adequately addressing the traffic review comments. Do we know if that has happened at this point?
Yes, my understanding is that the traffic engineer, TPD, had received information from Mr. Marshall, and they either issued something, they're about to issue something that they're satisfied with the way they addressed the comments. President Hacker, please note that anything that is a letter that is conditioned upon will be addressed by the applicant prior to recording. So just because of the simple fact that they may get a favorable prelim final approval tonight, they still have to comply. Whatever comments, 1, 2, 3 comments that are outstanding, they will have to address them before the recording of the plan takes place.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Hassan. That makes sense. And just to clarify, we're reviewing this at the working session tonight. This is a non-voting meeting, and what would happen if there is general agreement among the board is that we would advance this to a voting meeting for formal approval. So there's no formal approval coming tonight, where this is our process of diving in, making sure we understand, and then if there's agreement, we would send it forward to a date certain, which we will figure out, and then have the formal review and approval at that time.
Agreed, yes.
I believe Commissioner Thompson's hand was up at one point. I don't know if it still is.
It still is. Thank you, President Hager.
You're welcome.
Quick point of clarification. So the plan that we're seeing on the screen tonight doesn't match the vast majority of the plans that are in the packet, with the exception of one on a sheet Z1. So is this the current plan? And is this the plan that's been reviewed by the county and by Pannoni?
Yes, I'm not sure what's in your packet, but this is the plan that has, that was the last submission we made was on August 2nd, and this is the layout that is part of that.
Okay, and Mr. Hassan, this is the plan that you reviewed as well?
Commissioner, yes, correct. I concur with Mr. Marshall. That is the plan that I have before me right now.
Okay, that's great. And then the question for AutoZone, there's a request for a waiver to reduce the size of the parking spaces. The plan that we have in front of us right now, we're seeing 25 parking spaces, and the zoning minimum required is is 16. So if we're already exceeding the zoning requirements, why are we shrinking the parking spaces to cram more parking onto the site? Do we expect to fill these parking spaces? It seems a little counterintuitive to have a dead-end kind of drive into those parking spaces. We could kind of open it up a little. Somebody clarify that, why we're doing that?
Yes, so while the minimum required by zoning is only 16, as with most retail areas, they would like to have extra parking, for any kind of peak times. And so providing the bare minimum here does not work from a logistical standpoint for the AutoZone. I will say that we did work extensively with the township and with Mr. Hassan's office in order to make sure that the parking sizes were appropriate in the areas that they are. We also, it's important to note that these last 3 spaces in this area are designated as employee-only parking and are signed as such. You can't see it on the plan, but they will be marked as employee-only. And so there really won't be a lot of traffic on that end of the parking lot.
And we're comfortable with the turning radii of the car at the very end stall being able to kind of back out and get into that little alcove to maneuver out?
Yes, we are. Yeah, and while what I'll call the K turn here, we still are providing a normal 24-foot width, and so a car can back out and maneuver in that space.
All right. It just seems kind of a shame to me that we're cramming so much parking on here, and we're paving the whole site. There's not a whole lot of green here. I know we're kind of minimum compliant with the green, but if we could get a little more on there and maybe get rid of some of the useless parking spaces, I think that would be helpful.
I think what you're hearing is that those spaces are important to AutoZone, and having the minimum that the ordinance may allow. And normally it's almost the opposite in many situations, but in this particular district and with this particular use, the 16 parking spaces would not be adequate for the use. And so that's why we're showing the additional spaces. But as Keith said, we worked closely with the township staff and consultants to make sure that the parking layout does work and circulation works and that cars can pull in appropriately and safely.
Yeah, Commissioner Bull. Oh. Commissioner Thompson, do you have anything further?
Nothing further. Thank you, President Hager.
Thank you. Commissioner Bull.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was just curious if the applicant is also the owner of the AutoZone in Glenside. There is, on Easton Road, 4-minute drive away, another AutoZone, and I'm curious if it's the same owner, different owner?
Hi, so this is Bill Roundtree. I'm with the applicant. We're a preferred developer for AutoZone, but in this region, AutoZone also self-develops quite a bit of their stores. I believe that's an AutoZone self-developed store. But they manage all these stores corporately, whether they take it through or whether we develop it for them. And it's their marketing group that determines that they're not going to be taking customers from any of the closer stores. So they very much want to be here, and this location is what they identified as exactly where they want to be corporately.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it. The only other question I had was, the AutoZone in Glenside has been generally a very good neighbor. There are homes adjacent where there are, cars running, people making quick repairs. So neighbors have expressed some concern from time to time. It's not an ongoing incident, but I was just wondering, this is Commissioner Schreiber, this is in your ward you represent. Have the neighbors expressed, I'm wondering if the neighbors have expressed any concern or if there's been communication about the development that's not come up?
No, they have not. I mean, right now, there's a dry cleaner there, and then there's an empty store that's been empty for quite a while. So I think even though we do like the cleaners, I think they want something more active there.
Yeah, and it looks like there's been some nice activity plan to create a nice barrier, so it's wonderful to see. All right, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Bowe. Do other members of the board have comments or questions? I see Commissioner
Tom, I do a second.
Oh, go ahead, Tom. Commissioner Bowman.
Hi, Lori, I'm so glad for the work that you've done on this, and I'm all for it. And Rosalind can use it, and it'll be just great. Looks great. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bowman. Commissioner Vaughn.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. So we're talking about the property across the street from where the new Wawa is going to be, where the dry cleaners is, and that store is not empty. It is a Black-owned hair salon and barbershop. So I just wanted to be clear that I'm understanding that's a fairly new business that is right there, that we're saying is an empty space.
There is no longer a hair salon there? Is that what you're asking? It's where there's a cleaners, there's a...
Yeah, that's the dry cleaners that I use, so that's why I'm confused.
It hasn't been... It's been vacant for quite a while, I believe.
Okay, Commissioner Thompson, is that a legacy hand, or do you have another question?
That's a legacy hand. Although,
Okay.
you know, since you called on me, I would like to kind of compliment the applicant. I do like the siding of the building. I am appreciative of the fact that it's on the corner and it's activating the street front rather than kind of shoved to the back of the site with an asphalt, ocean in front of it. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Okay, if there's no further comments or questions, I will ask the question of, Commissioner Schreiber.
There's not a question, I was just going to say, the applicant has been trying to have meetings and push this along for quite a while now, and so I would ask that we move this to the board for approval.
Yep. Well, we don't take a formal vote, but I will ask if there's anybody here who has objection to this moving forward to the voting meeting for formal review and approval. Okay, I think we have our direction in this regard, and we thank you for your time this evening, and this matter will appear on an upcoming Board of Commissioners voting meeting agenda.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Have a good evening. Good night.
We're going to do public comment at the end after both presentations since there's no vote. Yeah. We'll move to the second presentation, and this is for us to consider the land development application 22-02 at the Huntington Valley Shopping Center, and this is for a Chipotle pad site. And once again, Mr. Manfredi, I'll ask you to introduce us to the presenters.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe I saw Mr. Kiefer. I'm not sure if Ms. Farrell is there as well. Wayne, are you handling?
Mr. Manfredi, Rob Lewis from Kaplan Stewart is standing.
Hey, Rob. If you would, please.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Manfredi. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. Rob Lewis from Kaplan Stewart, representing Craftco Company. As you heard, Wayne Kiefer from Showalter Associates is here as our engineer. My client is the owner of the Huntington Valley Shopping Center, which is identified as 801 Huntington Pike. I think I can share my screen, or if I can be given authority to share my screen, that'd be great.
So granted.
Thank you. Pull up a plan here quickly, just so that while I'm speaking, we can take a look at a plan. The project in front of the commissioners this evening is for the addition of an approximately 2,300 square foot pad site within the existing shopping center. Pad site being developed for Chipotle. The entire area of this proposal, the area of interest is currently impervious. It's parking within the parking field. So we are not taking undeveloped land for this, but rather adding it to that existing parking lot. Shopping center obviously is fully developed otherwise. And our site, I think Wayne shared with me earlier this evening, is about a little bit more than 1% increase, almost 2% increase in square footage. So all in all, a relatively minor addition to existing. And you can the shopping center. As a result, the redevelopment here really has focused on that area of interest. The project is not proposing any significant modifications to circulation within the shopping center or access points to the existing roadways. What's important, I think, also to note for those who maybe have not been a part of one of these or visited one of these is the newer model of Chipotle. I believe they refer to it as a Chipotle with a Chipotle lane. This reflects on some of the comments that came up that I think we've addressed during the Planning Commission meetings, but you have a standalone facility for a Chipotle restaurant, brick and mortar, but then what you have is a drive up or a pickup lane, not a traditional drive through. This Chipotle model, all orders for that pickup facility are done through the app or on your computer at home. And when you place your order, you make your payment, you're assigned or identified a pickup time, and then proceed to the Chipotle at that time and simply pick up your order. There is no need for a menu board or ordering facilities. You don't have the two window scenarios or the multiple drive lanes that you might see at some other facilities. It's a much more efficient model for Chipotle, and generally has been well received thus far. I had the opportunity to use one up in the Poconos. So that also reduces wait times and thus reduces any stacking. And so although we are providing the stacking that would be required for your ordinance, per your ordinance, for a traditional drive-through, the wait times here traditionally are significantly less than a traditional drive-through. So we don't believe that that stacking will even be required here for this model. There are additional parking spaces provided, pull-off spaces in case you show up early, or if you are unaware of that model and realize, oh, I'll pull over and order from the app, and then sit there and wait. So there are kind of pull-off spaces identified on the plan for those types of users. As I said, we're not really proposing any significant improvements to existing or changes in the access points here or the general circulation. We have been working with staff for quite some time on this project, addressing their comments, and we've been in front of the Planning Commission actually now twice. I was there on behalf of Gravco about 2 weeks ago, and at the end of the Planning Commission meeting, they unanimously recommended approval of the plan, subject to compliance with the outstanding review letters from Mr. Hassan's office, as well as from TPD. Speaking to those letters, I believe that after working with Pannoni and with TPD, we have whittled those letters down substantially. I think we're down to about 9 total outstanding comments from Pannoni, all of which will comply. And likewise, we have whittled down the TPD letter to a few outstanding comments, really simply trying to provide them a little bit of additional information that I think, as Mr. Hassan indicated in the last application, obviously would be a requirement prior to any opportunity to proceed to recording a plan. We would have to provide that information and get sign off from TPD. I am happy to go through any of those review letters with you. We have a couple of, call them more procedural waiver requests. We can go through those if you'd like. I think the one thing I wanted to point out is that hopefully, did that plan change for you all? Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. One comment in the review letter that the Planning Commission, we had some chatting about, is an existing condition, but they said, look, we're out there, it's an opportunity maybe to address it. There's some kind of odd striping that exists adjacent to the Citizens Bank, and when cars enter off Huntington Pike, there's some no parking area striped. It creates a strange shape and it feels like a pinch point, even though you obviously can drive over striping. It felt like a pinch point. And the request was to take the opportunity to maybe address that and make it more accommodating to incoming traffic while still being effective to try and discourage anybody from parking adjacent to the Citizens Bank to go to the ATM. So what we have shared with your consultants is a proposal to remedy a little bit of that striping. And that's what you see on this plan. You can see the existing striping underlying here where it creates that point which mirrors the shape of the building. And this proposal, which the Planning Commission was suggesting, straightens it out, makes the lane feel wider the whole way through, even though the pavement doesn't change, and then extends that no parking area down to really discourage anybody from parking in that area and hopefully do what they should do, which is park in one of the designated parking spots before heading to the ATM. So that was the only real feedback and change from the Planning Commission meeting. I just wanted to share that with the commissioners this evening. So I will leave it to President to direct us if you'd like us to go through any review letters or maybe just open it to questions from the commission.
I think we'll open it to questions, but before doing so, I'm going to ask if Mr. Hassan would once again comment. In his November 11th letter to the manager, there were some issues that he felt needed to be resolved and could be resolved prior to recommending approval to move forward. So Mr. Hassan, if you could comment, that would be most helpful.
Thank you, President Hacker. That is correct. Since the applicant appeared in front of the Planning Commission back on the 22nd of November, there were two traffic-related issues or matters that the applicant had agreed to address prior to them coming before you tonight. Since then, Mr. Lewis had shared one plan with you, the pavement marking, and the second one related to gap study that the traffic engineer had not necessarily required. He just brought it as a comment, says, could you take a look at it? And that's what the applicant is looking at. This is the gap study for traffic entering and exiting the site. Other than that, the waivers that are being requested by the applicant are pretty straightforward waivers. One of them, obviously, as the prior application to this, the applicant is requesting from a procedural standpoint for a prelim final review rather than a prelim and then final, which we also have no issues from our standpoint. And of course, we defer to the commissioners. Other than that, the applicant will, between now and the recording process, if or when they get there, they will address the comments and they will be ready for the recording process. I hope this addressed your question, President Hacker, and I'll answer any questions you have for me.
Thank you, Mr. Hassan. It does address my question. I'll now open this up for my colleagues who might have any comments or questions. I see Commissioner Thompson has his hand raised.
Thanks, President Hecker. Not a legacy hand this time. I think this came up in the Planning Commission too, but I'm hoping we can learn a little bit more about the trash enclosure on this one. It's in a fairly prominent location. It's the first thing you see if you're driving into the drive-thru, but it's also one of the first things you see coming into the shopping center or exiting the shopping center. So two questions on that. One, how is the trash truck approaching the trash enclosure to pick up the dumpster? And two, what are we doing to screen the back side of that from the entry drive coming in off of Huntington Pike?
I will, Mr. Thompson, I will speak for one moment and then allow Mr. Kiefer to address it. And this actually overlaps with a comment or two from, I believe, Mr. Narkowicz's letter, because there had been a prior comment. And hopefully, are you able to see my screen now with the Google Street View?
No, we're still seeing the Acrobat view.
Okay, so 1 second, let me try and do that again. Sometimes it doesn't like when I switch apps. How about that? Is that better?
Yes. Yep.
All right. So this is the that entry drive where we're talking about the striping. You can see the striping, and unfortunately, you can also see somebody parking illegally to use the ATM, which we had a laugh about at the Planning Commission too. But one of the comments that TPD just raised in their letter, and this is the overlap, and I will get to your comment, had to do with maybe considering providing an additional sidewalk along this entry drive. This shows you what that sidewalk would do. That sidewalk would necessitate removing all of this landscaping as well and the trees and so forth. So one of the comments I believe in Mr. Narkowicz's letter is that kind of, I don't think there was a conclusion in his letter, but it would be a shame to lose that landscaping. And one of the reasons it would be a shame is because it does screen that entry and where that trash enclosure is proposed to be located. I will let.
I actually agree with that. I think that landscaping is a little thin for the, your plan's only showing the existing landscaping to remain, but is that enough to really screen the enclosure?
I'm going to let Mr. Kiefer jump in on that because
I'll jump in. So the trash enclosure itself is a block enclosure. It's not your typical chain link fence with slats. So it'll be a little more decorative. One of the comments in the Pannoni letter, which we have agreed to, is to provide additional landscaping around that block enclosure to help screen that off. And the reason it's located there is moving it forward made no sense. It just puts it close to the road. Moving it further back is inconvenient to Chipotle and puts it much closer to the remainders of the stores. So it seemed to be the logical place on this site to put it.
And Mr. Kiefer, just, I think Mr. Thompson was also just asking if we could describe a little bit how that would be serviced by a trash truck.
The dumpsters will have to be pulled out from the enclosure. There's no way to get a trash truck in straight as you would prefer to do in this case. But in this case, they will have to be pulled out as they do in many other locations.
And we're able to somehow guarantee that. I'm actually really concerned about trucks going the wrong way down that one-way drive to access the front and just pick it up from there.
To come
You know what
to come through the drive-through backwards?
Yeah. Yeah.
There will be do not enter signs at this end of the drive-through. And again, I think either Chipotle or Kravco as the property owner should have control over the trash pickup there.
But which face are they picking up from? They're picking up from the left face, right? Where your arrow is right now?
They're picking up.
So what's to keep the trash
Chipotle
truck
side
from
of the
coming
enclosure.
down through the parking lot and just going the wrong way and just using the forks to pick it up from the front?
Again, there are do not enter signs at the end. I don't know what else we can do to discourage them other than the people actually paying them, directing them how to pick that up. If they're off hours, I could see them coming through the Chipotle in the correct direction and then maybe backing into that drive-through lane and then trying to take the dumpster out if they're off far enough off hours that it's not open.
Okay.
And an issue we are happy as an owner of the shopping center and an active owner of this property, we're happy to address that with our private trash hauler to make sure that it does not become an issue.
Okay, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Are there other comments or questions from members of the board? Are there any other hands raised, Grace? No. This is Drew's ward, but he has had to jump off. So obviously. Oh, he is? Okay, we'll wait a second and see if that happens, and then we'll go to public comment after we. There we go. Drew,
Hey everyone, I'm really sorry. Yeah, I had some tech issues. No, I've been listening in, and I appreciate it. And I'm with Mike on those comments, and it's a good question. I think that there's concerns that are reasonable, but overall the project is something that it seems to make sense. And we had a lot of literature to read through that was provided to us all, and it seems pretty thorough. So I feel comfortable with it and just wanted to chime in since I know that it's my ward. And again, I'm for the inconvenience there.
so you are supportive of this moving forward to a voting meeting for formal review?
I am. I mean, unless anybody has any reasons that I did miss some of it right there because of some tech issues, but I think that from what I read, it makes sense, and haven't received any feedback really against it.
Okay. Any final comments or questions? Okay. Is there anyone who disagrees with that proposed plan of action? Okay. We thank you for your time this evening and for the presentation. We're going to take public comment in a sec.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. You may want to stick around in case we'll open it up if there are any comments or questions. Anyone in the room wish to speak? And if not, we'll head to Zoom.
Ms. Lehman, you're unmuted.
So, Commissioner Hecker, you've made me very sorry that I took a moment to actually congratulate you on doing the right thing, because you've just done the wrong thing again, which is to make up the rules as you go and make them up contrary to the interests of the public, where we did not get a chance before the meeting ended in the prior AutoZone issue. And in your comment that you're not taking any vote and therefore you're doing that, that is supposed to be the working session, that you're not voting, but you are voting. You're taking a consensus vote, which is, does anybody vote against this? Is there anybody who's not on board with this? So you are taking a vote. And in some cases, you take a vote by eyeballing the room, and if nobody is saying anything else, then you yourself are making the decision. Decisions are being made in this working session as to what's going to happen and where it's going to go. And that is absolutely contrary to the interests of the residents of this township. They have a right to hear how each commissioner votes and how each commissioner weighs in, whether it's consensus or an aye or nay. And for what you're doing, you have absolutely taken our rights away again, and you're making up the rules as you go. That's not okay. So in the AutoZone, I wanted to ask what the waivers were, but I should be able to ask while somebody can ask that of the people who are in front of you and get an answer to that. And I am concerned about the waivers and concerned about the fact that there may not be hardships. And I understand even with Cedar Road that financial waivers have been put forth, or financial hardships have been put forth, which is illegal. And we've done that before. We have not acted properly with waivers and variances in the past. And so it's a concern here. And we need to have a voice, and we need to have answers to those questions. It is absolutely not appropriate to have 5 minutes to speak when we don't know what's going on, which you know. And I congratulated you, I thought, for turning that around. And then you've done this, where our comments are at the end. So we need to have some place where we can address how these comments are allowed to be made so that they are meaningful. There is no way that tonight has been anything but a debacle for resident rights. And again, to have a budget meeting, to have a budget approval with literally like 1 minute to speak on it is not reasonable and illegal. So what you're doing here by voting at this meeting is illegal. I wanted to know, I'd like to know who the principals are for the AutoZone. I would like to know who the AZ Abington LLC is, who the principals are. I'd like to know what the hardships were and, you know, why we are granting the nifty 50s was granted variances with absolutely no way that that property could not be developed under the ordinance that we have. So we're concerned about these kinds of actions. It needs to be changed. Okay, so I would like to know, Commissioner Hecker, are you going to review the, first of all, non-voting aspect of this meeting, the working session, and stop making it a working session? It needs to be a committee meeting where residents get a proper chance to speak and then a proper vote is taken so they can see how their residents acted or their commissioners acted. I would like to know, Commissioner Rothman, the Chipotle meeting was held with no Zoom. Did you even notify your residents that the Chipotle was at the Planning Commission and that there would be no Zoom to that meeting? I'm stymied by this action. So if they don't know what's going on, the residents across the street from the Chipotle did not have any option to have proper time to question about the headlights in their eyes and how that would, in their living rooms, and how that would be impacted.
Ms. Lehman, your time has expired. Thank you for your comments.
Oh.
And seeing that there's no further public comment, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.